The reality we live in can be a very strange place. Most of the time, fact being stranger than fiction. How will we ever start to understand this reality we live in unless we question everything? Join me and a guest as we unravel the mysteries of this reality, one topic at a time. This is Inquiries of Our Reality with Shayn Jones.
Reality isn't what it seems. Abductees taking aboard a craft with a tractor beam. Is life a simulation or an astral dream? Aliens travel through black holes in different galaxies. Life is a bizarre odyssey with a mic talking about philosophy. Well, Bigfoot is stalking campers as a Wendigo walks through the woods of sharpened antlers, using a Ouija board to talk to the dead like a necromancer. There's so many questions and not enough answers. So if you're interested in mysteries and abnormalities, tune in and listen to Inquiries of Our Reality. So if you're interested in mysteries and abnormalities, tune in and listen to Inquiries of Our Reality.
What is up, Inquirers, and welcome to the expanse of deep open-minded conversation. I'm the one they call Shane, and tonight for you guys, I have somebody who has kind of side-skidded me through the community, and I was supposed to set something up with him a while ago, completely forgot to do it. He ended up hitting me back up, and we finally were able to set this one up. And of course, it's diving into one of my absolute favorite topics, cryptids as a whole, and this guy dives into some of the more obscure stuff, and you guys know I love diving into not just the mainstream cryptids, but some of the more obscure stuff. And at the end of the day, man, this guy is doing a great job chasing all of these weird monsters, creatures, and dare I say, he's chasing legends. And before we get into this one today, I just want to take a quick second on a little bit more of a somber note. I hope that everybody who is dealing with the disasters on the East Coast is staying safe. I had a couple shows this week that actually had to reschedule because they were in the path of the stuff that was going on. And I know I have a lot of listeners out there. My co-host, Orin from Bizarre Encounters, he's over in mid-North Carolina, but of course he's still in the state that's getting hit. But I just hope all you guys are staying safe out there. I hope all you guys are doing everything that you guys can to just keep your family safe, keep your animals safe, keep your property safe, and hopefully all this stuff blows over, and hopefully you guys stay strong during all this stuff. And at the end of the day, my love and prayers go out to you guys. But going on to a little bit less of a sad note, the next event that I will be at is Snarly Cryptid Halloween 3. That's actually happening in just a short few weeks, actually. That's going to be happening on October 26th. That is a Saturday. There's more information down in the show description if you guys want to check it out. It's going to be happening at the Ranson Civic Center in Ranson, West Virginia. So if anybody's in the area, you guys want to come out and say hi, greatly appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to hopefully seeing some of you guys out there. And for anybody that didn't catch it on the last couple episodes, I recently set up a hotline number for people that want to report their encounters. I'm going to be using some of these for future episodes, specifically for anybody that's been watching on social media. The Reality Report is a new show that I'm going to be working on that I want to kind of specialize in some of the more obscure stuff that I find on the internet as far as encounters and stuff, but I also want to include you guys and your guys' personal experiences in that. So if anybody wants to call into the hotline, leave a voicemail, and let me know if it's okay if I use it on the show within that voicemail, and a means of being able to contact you. And like I'm usually promoting on the show, if you guys don't want to record it as a voicemail and it's okay that I read it on the show, you guys can always email me at ommencounterreports@outlook.com. And if anybody is interested in having me investigate somewhere and you guys don't want it talked about on the show at all, you guys can also call into that hotline number, or you guys can also email me. And if I'm not able to make it out to that area, I might be able to have somebody that will be able to make it out to that area. But just let me know what you guys want to do with those, because I just want to make sure I don't put anything on the show that you guys don't want me to. But I also want to be able to give you that investigation help if you guys are interested in that too. And just a quick message, this podcast has a strong focus on community engagement, so I encourage all listeners to share their experiences and research on the show. That being said, you guys already got the OMM Encounter Reports email, and you also have the hotline, which again is 313-364-1551. But if anybody's interested in being a guest on the show, you guys can email me at increaseofourrealitypodcast@outlook.com. And every single thing that I mentioned throughout the show is all available in the link tree, which is available down in the show description. And with that, let's get into the show. Please welcome to the show, Nash Hoover from Chasing Legends. How's it going today, man?
It's going good. How are you?
Doing pretty well, man. Absolute pleasure to finally get you to come on the show. Like I was talking about before we even started, I had you on the idea that I wanted to get you on the show. I had it where I saved your link tree and all that kind of stuff, and then you kind of get busy with life and stuff like that, and I totally sidetracked from it. And then a couple weeks ago, you ended up hitting me up about coming on the show because I posted something, so it all kind of came full circle and worked out. So. But I guess I guess a good spot to get started for anybody that may not be familiar with who you are, what your work is, what Chasing Legends is. Why don't you let them know a little bit about your background, a little bit about your work, and a little bit about what you do.
Yeah. So again, my name is Nash Hoover. I'm the host and co-creator of Chasing Legends, which is a web series on YouTube. It follows myself and a small team, and we investigate various cryptid legends currently across the country. Eventually, we'd like to go global with it. We've done a ton of research globally, but just have never actually gone boots on the ground. But yeah, it's very in the realm of the old show Destination Truth. The production team is as hands-on as I am. They're all characters in the show as well as crew, and it's a lot of fun. And we just get out there and go after some of these. I like to do the lesser known cryptid stuff, and so we go after and tackle some pretty interesting topics and have fun doing it.
Well, definitely going to have to dive into some of those topics, but of course, where did it all kind of start for you? What inspired you to get down this path doing it in the first place? And also kind of leading off of that, what was your first investigation that you started doing, and what exactly specifically was your intention to first start investigating?
So the concept of the show came out in 2013. Me and my friend Caitlin Keeley, she was Ricker at the time, but she's since been married. We had always talked about kind of doing a paranormal series of sorts, and it was going to be a kind of a co-host deal between the two of us. And I was watching. It was May of 2013, and I was watching. It was back when Animal Planet did their Monster Week, which was kind of basically was a week long segment. I think it was every May. I think they did it, and it was cryptid kind of esque shows. We
need to start a petition to bring that back. They got Shark Week still. We need Cryptid Week.
I know. Yeah, they got to bring back Monster Week. That was good stuff. But they had it was the sequel to, and they passed it off as a real honest to God documentary, but it was totally made up. But it was about mermaids. And
was that the one where they had the footage where somebody was underwater in a sub and a hand came up over the top or something? Yep. Yeah, I remember that getting passed around the internet for a while when that came out.
Yeah, I think the first one was the mermaids, the body found, and the second one was further evidence or something like that. But so I was watching the second one, the follow up, and I was texting with her, and I was and I had remembered because they had mentioned this mermaid case in Kiryat Yam, Israel, and I remember it from an episode of Destination Truth, and I remember from that episode that the town of Kiryat Yam essentially had $1 million reward for indisputable proof that this mermaid was living off the coast of Israel. So I was was texting with her and just kind of joking we should go and and look for this thing and try and collect this reward. And then from there, it kind of, turned into, I was we should, make a documentary about it and, document the whole adventure and process of just, essentially looking for this mermaid. And then from there, it kind of turned into, well, what if we do this with other things? There's a lot of good cryptid stories out there. Why don't we do a whole show?
Did you get a chance to make it out to Israel to actually investigate that?
No.
That's what I was going to say. You didn't really get to get out of the country. I was curious if you actually at least got to make it out of the country once.
We did go to Ireland once, and we did film something there that never was released. But so we've done one out of the country. So basically, the next few weeks was essentially we kind of put together the loose concept at the time. At the time, nobody that her and I had I had some video background She didn't. We basically just were going into it with the kind of idea of it's kind of just like a fake until you make it. And everyone that I brought on to kind of act as crew were just friends that I, was doing kind of various paranormal investigating with at the time. And so, none of us really knew how to make a show. And
so you started off paranormal investigating first before you really got into like cryptids and stuff?
I got into cryptids very young. And then at the time, I really didn't know that you could like actually go look for cryptids. Like it just really didn't. Until I started kind of watching like Destination Truth and Monster Quest is kind of when I was like, oh, you actually can go out and look for these things. Like there is like a way to do it. But then, I got in high school, I kind of got it. I got into like Ghost Adventures and all that. So I was like, oh yeah, we could do that. And, that was easy because I'm in the Midwest and there's, no shortage of haunted places.
You're telling the truth on that one.
Yeah. So me and my friends, would just kind of go to odd, just various places and kind of get access to private, residents and stuff like that. So that was kind of my gateway into paranormal investigating. But I essentially just started like, jumping on the internet and, finding all these various cryptid stories from all over the world. And essentially started assembling a list, which I still add to today. And, we were like, oh, this is what we could pull off. And at the time, we were trying to kind of, we were going to do both ghosts and cryptids, whereas now we are like 100% cryptid. So it was a good mix of, local cryptid stuff as well as, local ghost hunting stuff. And then we didn't have a name. We knew we wanted to do something that incorporated legends. We just didn't know like how to, because we're like, legend hunters sounds too cliche, and we didn't want to have anything that sounded. We want to kind of have something that would be a good universal term for.
Not sound too cheesy.
Yeah, not sound too cheesy, but it could work with pretty much anything that fits in the paranormal category. Because we at the time too, we were going to do like UFO investigations and all that stuff too. Like we were going to do everything.
Chasing Legends is a super duper solid name. Like I really like the way like text looks if you like lay it out properly, and it just has one of those really balanced looking logos. So like props on coming up with like a fantastic name.
Yeah, thanks. So I was actually watching. There was a show on, I think it was National Geographic. It was called Chasing UFOs. And this was kind of like this was still back in 2013. So this was, kind of like the paranormal TV was a thing, but it was really starting to ramp up. And I was like, oh, chasing legends. That sounds good. And, I texted Kayla, like, what do you think? She's like, that sounds good. And then that's what we went with. And then, I was like, okay, well, we need to test this concept. And for context, at the time, Caitlin lived in Massachusetts and I lived here in Minnesota. Now she lives in Ireland, which is why she never really ended up being physically involved in the show. And I was like, well, we need to test this concept. We need to make sure it works. So we basically took the very, very loose concept that we had and we're like, all right, let's go out and shoot something. Let's find something that, we know is local. And we're like, we'll just shoot it, cut it together, and see how it looks. No plans to release it. We just kind of want to make sure this will work. And we went to a place called Hell's Tunnel in a town just south of where we all lived, and shot an episode. And we had a ton of crazy stuff happen. And we're like, we need to release this, and we did. And that ended up being our very first episode.
We will be right back after this brief commercial break. But just a quick reminder, if you guys want to stay up to date on the show, you guys can always go and follow Inquiries of Our Reality and Open Minds Media on Instagram, Facebook, Discord, YouTube, and TikTok. Now feel free to fast forward through these commercials so we can hop right back into the show. And we are back, so let's get back to it. So I'm assuming that first one was a paranormal investigation then?
Yep. Yeah, and that's kind of what I always joke, is that we were a cryptid show that our very first episode was a ghost hunt.
and just out of curiosity too, like what ended up happening on that first episode that you guys felt like you wanted to post it when you didn't have those intentions in the first place?
It was just like, as soon as we stepped into the place, it was just on. And my cousin, who was still with the team, Michaela, she got the brunt of it. She was hearing things. She was getting just randomly emotional, tears in her eyes. Doesn't remember most. She basically remembers getting there and starting their investigation. Then there was like, she pretty basically from that to when we left, she doesn't remember anything. But then there was a point where we were walking. So Hell's Tunnel, it's literally what it sounds. It's a tunnel. It's just a long, I'd say maybe a 300, 400 foot tunnel. That just, just concrete all around. And, I heard various stories kind of growing up from people that have been there. I'd been there a handful of times before we shot this, so I was aware of it.
What's kind of the legend, just if anybody's not familiar?
It's so, I think the last time we were there, which was last summer of 23, we went just to kind of like see it. That had been the first time we'd been there in like 5 years. And then, we'd been there kind of a handful of times in between when we shot in 2013. We kind of went there as like a, 10-year, sort of a thing. And they do have a plaque now, and they also have lights and the whole thing, which just takes away the whole facade of it. But they have a plaque now that dictates the history, and it's not anything that I was kind of led to believe by people that lived in the city of Faribault. But basically, we were told that it's this long tunnel. It's near a prison that used to be a mental facility. And the story that we were always, and there's like these little tiny rooms that are all like, bricked up. And then in the middle of it, in the direction towards where the prison is, there's like a larger, that you can see it's, a bricked in area that almost looks like another tunnel that would go towards the prison. And so we were always told that was like basically where they locked away the kind of criminally insane, basically just the worst of the worst. And apparently that was not the case. If it is, they didn't want to be obviously public with it when they made this whole kind of dedication to it that's now there.
I was going to say, if it's something that like could come back on the town itself, it's like, even though they may know the true history, they might try to.
Yeah, there's some dark stuff. Because I know there was I forget what the hell it was. But yeah, I think there was like a pretty large facility that a lot of people died in, because I know there's been a handful of times we've investigated various places throughout the city of Faribault and have come across the same plaque that's basically dedicated to all the people that died. And one of them is a cemetery that's not far from where this tunnel is, that we found by accident. And so that was kind of like the story that was just, and it always seemed to be one, at least in the experiences we had, it was just one, like kind of nasty entity. And I'm so on the ghost stuff. I've had, and I always tell people, like, I've had some weird stuff happen, but I'm nothing enough for me to say, yes, ghosts exist. So we were, and this is in the episode, we were walking. It didn't get captured, unfortunately, because we were only running one camera at the time. We were walking in basically like a single file. It was, I think JC, who was doing camera at the time, was in front for whatever reason. And he had camera pointing forward. And then behind him was our friend Patrick, and then me, and then Michaela was behind me. And Michaela is 4'11", and I'm 5'10", so obviously height difference. I heard rocks kind of skip off the wall behind me, and I thought it was her. Like, I thought she was like kicking rocks. Well, I turned to look at her, and keep in mind, I'm looking down at her. I have a headlamp on. I can see where her shadow is. She's got tears pouring down her face, and I look up, and behind her is basically like towering. I had to look up. There was this kind of a shadow figure standing behind her, and it kind of like disappeared like as soon as I like locked eyes with it. And we were kind of like, okay, we need to get out of here. Let's just kind of wrap this up. And the camera battery died at this moment, but the last thing you hear in the audio is Michaela kind of weeping, saying, "We're leaving." And I said, "Yeah, do you not want to?" And she says, "No, like crying no, and then like the camera cuts off. It's very Blair Witch, and it was not intentional. And yeah, so then in editing, we heard other stuff, and I of course I didn't like, because we had no plans to release this. So in editing, we heard other things that I could have marked but didn't. And then at the time, I had a surround sound system in my living room. So we burned it to a DVD and put it on the TV just to kind of, it's like, oh, we got to see what this looks like on the big screen kind of a thing. And we heard other things like in the surround sound system. We're like, holy shit, like this, we actually, like, basically, we thought it was just like that one instance, but then it was like, as soon as we walked into the tunnel, there was noises and all these other things that we're picking up. And
that's kind of the fun and hard part about paranormal investigations is like when you're there, it's like you don't catch 90% of what you actually end up catching. It's like, and half the time on the audio, it's like if you're not paying attention, like you may even miss some stuff that ends up being some really, really good, solid stuff when you isolate it.
Yeah.
Even like the video stuff. I mean, just catching stuff off in the distance. I mean, same thing with Sasquatch stuff. It's like people don't realize how meticulously you have to go back through this footage.
It's like then we shot, because we shot that first episode with a Canon T3i like DSLR, because this was like back when like the DSLR revolution was happening, so that was like all the rage. We shot that and with some crazy like Scorpion rig with a bunch of lights, like no night vision, like we had no money. And then I had a GoPro, and that's how we shot it. It was just like headlamps and like and that was it. So we had 2 cameras.
Dude, I'm running a GoPro myself, so honestly, I'm still running a GoPro, and I just put that on my head when I go squatching and stuff.
I've got a ton of them now. Like So I mean, now of course we were 4 people, only 1 camera guy. Now we're 5, 6 people, sometimes 7, 2 camera guys, an audio guy, and then we have we usually have like a 3rd camera that kind of floats between the people that aren't camera guys. So that's and we used to just shoot, basically we'd shoot an episode in a day and we would just like run, and now it's over, days. So yeah, I mean, we're taking, 4, sometimes 5, sometimes 6 cameras all day of, filming over, 3-4 days, and then compressing that down to a 20-30 minute.
Dude, that's a lot of footage to go through too. Cause I mean, say you're running it for almost the whole day. Let's just say it's 12 hours that you guys are out and running and doing it. Times 6 cameras, you said?
Yeah, sometimes.
Yeah, so that's like that's weeks of footage, realistically, if you actually put it together.
And plus, all the audio is recorded separately, so then we have to match that up. And
well, not weeks. It's 3 days. Sorry, I didn't want to sound totally ridiculous to that math. It'd be 3 solid days worth of footage to go through.
Yeah, I mean, we're a lot more like professional now. Like I've brought in a lot of people that are really good video people and understand how to tell story, and so we take post-production incredibly seriously, to where like the amount of cameras and the amount of footage like really doesn't make us nervous anymore, because we have that plan moving forward of, it's like, okay, we're shooting this is going to be here, we're shooting this, it's going to be there, and then once we get into the edit, we know, okay, well, all that footage is here, kind of a thing. Whereas before, I was very much just we show up, shoot as much stuff as we can, get the important stuff, and then hope it all comes together.
I mean, even having multiple people on the team, at least you got a few different people that can go through the footage, and you're not just sitting here by yourself trying to run through that much footage to see if you notice anything weird in the background too. Got a little bit of help for it.
I lucked out too, where a majority of us all have editing backgrounds. So like there's, 4 of us that can kind of rotate out and throw fresh eyes at different things.
And then, where did it end up kind of transitioning after that? Like when you started like heavily getting into the cryptids, like what have been some of your favorites? What have been some of the ones that you like specialize in the most? I'm assuming like a lot of people specialize in Sasquatch. One of my personal favorites too, but like which one's your favorite cryptid specifically to try to investigate?
So I investigate everything. Like I research everything. Like I'm not one thing specifically. Like I definitely have like a handful that I will throw more research towards. I mean, obviously the Bigfoot stuff it's fun to look into, just because it's such a broad kind of thing. Like it's not just a North American thing; like it's a global thing. And I think it's crazy how many people still don't realize that.
Different names starts throwing people off.
Yeah. Well, like, so we were at the Van Meter Visitor Festival a few weeks ago, and everyone that came by our booth, we'd be like, "What's your favorite cryptid?" And if they said Bigfoot, we would be like, "Okay, which one?" And they'd be like, "What do you mean?" Like, what do you mean? What do I mean? Which one? The classic North American one. I'm like, "Okay, which one?"
Which state? Which region specifically? Because there's different groups of them.
And then I'd start like rattling off like all the different Bigfoot names like globally, and they'd be like, just the Pacific Northwest one, or the Yeti, or
See, I love the Yeti thing though, because a lot of people will be like, "Oh yeah, the Yeti's my favorite," and I always find it funny how many creatures are depicted incorrectly. Because it's like everybody, you think of the Yeti, you think of a white thing, but when you actually start looking into it, you realize that like in the old folk or Tibetan folklore of it, there was never.
It's not described as white. It never.
Yeah, it never was described as white.
It was like the Hollywoodization and like the pop cultureization of the Yeti made it white, and that's what kind of stuck. But yeah, it's always been described as like reddish brown.
And I've also heard that there obviously like a lot of people make the depictions of the Yeti as like almost bigger than normal Sasquatches too. And I've always heard the depictions of the Yetis actually being a little bit smaller than normal Sasquatches, but they're around that like 6 foot range instead of the 6 to 8 foot range.
Well, and for it to be smaller would make sense because obviously this is something that lives up in a mountain where you're not going to have a ton of resources. So you're going to have that kind of like, so where I'm thinking of the, evolutionary kind of dwarfism essentially. Obviously it's not small by any means, but it's going to be smaller than other
big enough to stay warm
species that are going to live in a climate that has more resources essentially.
Big enough to stay warm, but not too big where it's not going to be able to find food and also be able to find stuff for coverage. Because, I mean, of course, there's going to be caves and little nooks and crannies and stuff along the mountain, but how often are you going to find like a caves that have like a 10-foot opening? Like, it makes a lot more sense for them to have a smaller size to be able to weasel into some of these places. Because assumably, even things with hair got to get out of the wind and find places to stay warm. So if they're not able to fit in these places, they would just die off from freezing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the Bigfoot stuff is probably the one that we cover the most, not because it's like our favorite, but just because there is so much to kind of go on. Like there's just so many different ones to kind of tackle. And plus Bigfoot obviously is hugely popular. So
draw people in.
Yeah.
Because they may not know the obscure ones, but people will come in for the Bigfoot stuff and they'll stay for the obscure stuff.
Yep. It's another reason too why it's like I'm not a huge fan of like the Dogman stuff, but it's some of the cases are worth looking into, and obviously it's popular. So
hey, I'm from Michigan, so like we got the Michigan Dogman legend stuff. So it's like, I definitely dive into it because it's like one of our state like popular cryptids and stuff. But at least for Michigan, man, there's a lot of like weird stuff that comes out of the Manistee, and like I know people see them everywhere. It could definitely be one of those things that's possible, like Sasquatch, that they're all over the place. But if I was gonna put money down on where I think the best luck you'd actually have to possibly find a Dogman, it would definitely be either one, of course, the Land Between the Lakes, or the Manistee in Michigan. I feel like those are probably your most prime spots for Dogman stuff. And there's a lot of weird, violent encounter reports that come from at least near the Manistee. Obviously, there's the big one that everybody knows about between in Land Between the Lakes, but there's a lot of like ones with them going to like attack truckers, and truckers putting a couple shots into these things and watching them roll off the side, and then all of a sudden they're gone when they try to double back and check them out. But I haven't heard about too many like full on like murders for these things, but I have heard a lot of stories of truckers supposedly putting a couple of rounds into these things when they're stopped on the side of the road, checking their tires, doing something like that. But yeah, it gets weird, man, at least for the Michigan stuff.
Yeah.
Hold that thought. We'll be right back. But before we get into this commercial break, if anybody is interested in supporting the show or any of the work I do over here, you guys can go and check out the OMM Patreon. Over there is 7-day free trials available for all of the tiers, and it is constantly updating with new shows and different stuff going on. You guys can also go and check out the OMM merch store, constantly getting updated with new designs, not just pertaining to the podcast themselves, but also cryptid, paranormal, and extraterrestrial related designs. And the third way you guys can support the show, if you guys think I deserve it, is that you guys can leave a 5-star review or rating for the show on iTunes or Spotify. And if you guys leave a 5-star review, of course, I will read on the show and give you guys a big shout out. Now let's get to the commercial break so we can hop back in the show. And we are back. So let's hop right in.
And then lake monster stuff I'm big into. Always have. I mean, that goes back to kind of when I first got into cryptids with like Loch Ness and such. So
Dude, I've always kind of thought about this funny thing that every one of these big lakes seems to have some type of like a lake monster. And at least the ones that are connected, I've been kind of curious.
Lakes.
I mean, that's exactly, yeah. Not even necessarily big lakes, but at least some of the ones that are connected. I'm kind of curious how much of this stuff actually like lapses over where, you know, there might be a reporting here, and here. And people think it's 3 different lakes, 3 different monsters, but it's actually the same monster that's going in between rivers to these multiple lakes. So like, I feel like definitely the whole idea behind lake monsters seems to be one of the most plausible when it comes to a lot of the cryptid stuff. But on the other side of it, of course, too, like I always take into consideration that there may not be as crazy of a number as people think there are, and that it might just be a couple of them that are just seen in multiple locations, and people kind of just call them different things depending on which lake they're in at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're all described somewhat the same. And at least for North America, I know Michigan, digging into some of the background of it, we were like tropical oceans, like shallow oceans, like back in the prehistoric age. So, I mean, it definitely would have made sense for like plesiosaur type dinosaurs to be all over North America. And depending on when these cataclysms happen, when water levels started rising, shifting, all that kind of stuff, I mean, it would definitely make sense that these things, maybe if they did exist for a while, they may have adapted to being in fresh water because it may have been all that was available, and they ended up getting stuck in these certain areas, and then maybe over time they've kind of adapted to be a little bit smaller than they may have been in the prehistoric age. But at least for North America, I just see like a lot of validity to the possibility of these things existing in the lakes just because of what this area was during prehistoric times and what was actually here.
yeah.
Especially the northern states, because I know that those ones were more like the tropical ocean. We're a little bit south, obviously, you get in the mountains and everything, so it's a little bit different. But
Well, if you look too, at least in North America, most of the lake monster reports are northern.
that, or
There's not much.
they get caught in
there's not
between
much,
mountains
like,
too.
South, yeah. There's not much like lake monster stuff in the south. Like it's very much the northeast, upper Midwest, and then all the way across the Pacific Northwest.
Dude, I'm from Michigan, so we got the Great Lakes up here, man. We of course have our lake monster, we have Pressy and stuff, but like I'm surprised there's not a lot more reports of people seeing lake monsters, just because those are like the biggest freshwater bodies that are connected like in the entire world. So it's like I'm surprised that there's not a lot more sightings or a lot more like thought and projection on there being lake monsters in the Great Lakes. Like there's a few researchers and stuff to talk about it, but it's not. I feel like if you're going to have some kind of luck with catching a lake monster, the Great Lakes are probably one of like your best possible locations for these things, especially Lake Superior, because it gets so deep that the bodies don't come back up. So it's like, think about how much space these things would have at the bottom of the water and nobody would ever see these things.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're smart, they just stay down. I mean, they might possibly stay down because assumably, if it's a bigger thing, it's going to need more food, and those bigger fish can be at the bottom of the water. So it's like there may not be that much of a reason for these things to be towards the top. And I think I've discussed this before on the show, talking about like ocean monsters and stuff that, back in the day when people were talking about getting attacked by krakens and stuff like that, we thought that was a cryptid forever until we realized these giant squids actually exist. Mm-hmm. And starting to kind of connect stuff, we realized that assumably these giant squids thought that the ships were whales and they're actually going to attack them for a meal. So it's like, you haven't heard about these lake monster attacks in forever. And I think it's because of the fact that back in the day, it was wooden ships going across the top of the water. Like it wasn't nearly making as much noise. There wasn't nearly as much traffic. And now you have all these giant ships that are constantly making this loud vibration that's going through the water and everything. Like it seems like it would almost keep things away from these things. So it's like people leave it in the past like it's folklore. But if you actually like put pieces together, it makes sense that these bigger creatures would now stay lower because they know that there's constant traffic on the top of the water, on top of the loud noises that are coming off the boat into the water. It's like they have no reason to go up there when they got food down at the bottom at this point. Where before, the ocean, the lakes, it was all them. There wasn't any traffic on it besides just wooden ships here and there.
Yeah, those are good points.
But diving back into some of your projects and stuff. So obviously the Sasquatch stuff, but you said you like to dive into some of the obscure stuff. And I always like to get into the obscure stuff on the show just because, I dive into cryptids myself, of course, doing the show and everything like that. So I always try to see if people can throw ones at me that I haven't heard before. So if you got some like really obscure, interesting ones, man, I always love spotlighting that kind of stuff on the show.
So ones that we've filmed, we've done Pukwudgies in Massachusetts, and then we did like the Rougarou in Louisiana, which both of those are kind of like cryptids that definitely have more of like a folkloric, supernatural kind of back to them. Those are probably the two. All the ones we've looked into, those are probably the two that I would say have the least possibility to like exist in reality. Like there's not really much like in biology that would make sense for what they are if people are seeing a flesh and blood, whatever.
Hey, the Rougarou stuff might be like the Louisiana version of the Dogman. It's like, skunk ape for Sasquatch. The Rougarou could be for the Dogman.
Yeah, I mean that's basically what is described. Is it's it's a large canine. But with that one, it was a lot of it was described very much in the realm of it's like it's like a curse almost, and it's not like a werewolf where you transform in the full moon. Like once you become a Rougarou, you are a Rougarou until certain things kind of happen to break you out of it, and it almost kind of seemed like it was like a physical manifestation of guilt. Like if you did something, it's kind of if you did something bad, that's kind of when you get this Rougarou on you. At least that's kind of how it was explained to us when we were down there. But then you have a lot of people. We went out on we had a local Cajun guy take us out into the swamp, and he had some stories kind of growing up where they were essentially told not to go out into the swamp at night because it would get them, and it's like these are people that live in an area that have known animals that are more of a real threat, but they were basically raised to not go out because of this potential creature.
I mean, at least stuff like that, you got to definitely take into consideration that, it may have been something to like scare the kids away from this certain area because, kid can be like, oh, I'm tough, I can fight a crocodile. But when you hear about a Rougarou, it's a totally different thing.
Yeah.
But at least for some of this folklore stuff, one thing I like to take into consideration sometimes is like the fact that a lot of this folklore stuff is rooted in something. And at least for a lot of like the werewolf stuff, for example, I don't think necessarily people were being seen transforming from a human into a werewolf. I think it was some of those things that people may have seen something weird. It may have looked partially dog-like and partially man-like, so they kind of just assumed and started kind of putting the lore together with it. And at least for this one, I feel like it's definitely a possibility that, of course, all the folklore and stuff completely got off hinge and just kind of went in a totally different direction, but there may still be a root in it that they were seeing something weird in the swamps, and they just kind of created this whole backstory to it. And I mean, again, maybe it could be the same thing that we refer to as Dogman now, but they just kind of created their own folklore in this area, and it was just compartmentalized in this certain area until it started spreading out. But I mean, throwing all that stuff out, it definitely seems like there might still be a possibility of this thing being a physical creature, and then they just were like, oh yeah, we saw something weird, and if you do stuff bad, you're going to turn into that.
Well, and with the Rougarou too, we found that it a lot of the lore kind of traces back to the French influence on Louisiana, and like Quebec has their own kind of version of it called the Loup-garou, and that is another French kind of. And it basically the folklore goes all the way back to the countrysides of France that have all of these different large canine cryptid stories and such. So it's interesting in that fact because it's it's not just solely rooted in Cajun folklore. Like it traces all the way back to like the French influence of the area.
Kind of a cool side note too. I learned this one when I was researching a different episode at one point, but it kind of diverged away a little bit as far as the folklore goes, but it was completely described the same way, and it was obviously influenced by that. Yep. It was the natives would call it was like they called it the Rougarou or something like that because they couldn't pronounce Rougarou properly because they couldn't speak French. So it like created this whole other spin-off folklore of like this native version of them trying to say the word like Rougarou and end up being like Rougarou or something like that. But yeah, so as far as the Rougarou goes, man, that was kind of a funny one for me because I haven't actually gotten to talk about that one too much on the show. And it was one of those weird things that like stuck in my head back when I was a kid that I was watching some just obscure documentary or whatever on History Channel. And I remember watching this one about the Rougarou, and there's all these like super duper like swamp living guys, and they're just like telling all these like Rougarou stories. And it was just one of those weird things that like stuck with me. But weirdly on the other side, since I've gotten into this stuff, I haven't actually had too much of an opportunity to dig into the Rougarou, even though like it was kind of the base that kind of pushed me into the direction that I've been in, weirdly enough. Just those weird little things that stick with you that you see on TV one day.
Yeah, because like, when we were researching cases that when we were doing that season 1, we were researching the cases for it. We were like, it's like, it would be nice to kind of shoot in kind of a different environment than kind of what we have. Like, we already have a Bigfoot case in the forest. Then we have, the Pukwudgies are in the forest. Then we get a lake monster case. Like, it'd be nice to kind of get somewhere different. And, then we came across, the Rougarou story. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. It could be fun to go down and, investigate in the swamps and this and that. And then the more we looked into it, we're like, okay, this is, this has enough to go on. And then, fortunately for us, though, we were shooting, we just pretty much shot that whole season like during like the height of COVID, and we just took advantage of all like the cheap airline, prices and
nobody around either, so it's easier to film.
But then at the same time, there was a lot of things that we wanted to film that we couldn't because of COVID. So like they have there's a yearly festival for dedicated to the Rougarou down in Houma, Louisiana, and we had it all worked out with the the planning committee. We're gonna come down there and film and kind of interview people, and then it was like 3 weeks before we were gonna go down there, they emailed us and are like, we can't, we got to cancel this. We're, with all the COVID protocol, we're basically being told like we can't do it. So then, we weren't able to incorporate that, which that would have been a really sweet segment. And then we had like 2 other interviews lined up that, kind of backed out. So then we just ended up doing the one guy, and then, kind of had the boat captain speak kind of about his personal stories. So then we were just like, let's do it. Let's throw this one in there. Like I had never heard of it up until kind of researching that one. And up until now, it doesn't seem like, it's not as popular of one, even though it's like our most viewed episode.
Probably because it's obscure, because not too many people, I feel like, really cover Rougarou, like I said.
Well, and for whatever reason, like the YouTube algorithm, like recommends that to people more than the rest. Like, I think it's just because it's like Cajun-esque, because it always like, I can see like the analytics, and it's like always, it's like those Cajun justice shows that people will watch, and then that it gets recommended to. So
that, or it's like it's tagging it more under folklore, because it seems like, specifically like the alien stuff, you get a lot of the stuff that's pushed down to the bottom. Some of the Sasquatch stuff, depending on what you're talking about. But if you're covering something that is more viewed in the mainstream as folklore, I feel like you'll have that better luck with the algorithm, or it'll push the more folklore-y stuff up before it'll push up like somebody going squatching, for example.
Well, it's funny because like that's probably our best looking episode in terms of just like what we incorporate, just like all the things we did and all the things we covered, and then just how nicely it was put together. So it definitely deserves the view count, but there's definitely like the Mogollon Monster episode is probably my favorite in terms of just like the investigation was really good. We had a lot of really good interviews. Like it was very, I just kind of liked how we shot that episode, and that's the least viewed of the 4 that we shot in 2020.
Well, I guess to give it a little bit of a spotlight, I can, of course, include that link down in the show description for that one specifically, so people can go and check it out. But if you want, give some people some of the backstory to it. Get people excited about it, man, so they can go and check it out.
So Mogollon Monster is like Arizona's variation of Bigfoot. It's reported up in the Mogollon Rim, northern Arizona, like big mountainous canyon forest. It's not what you'd expect from Arizona at all. It's like a completely different area. Basically, the Mogollon Rim is like where the Colorado Plateau like meets like lower Arizona. So it's just like it's like a 1,500 foot, just straight cliff out of nowhere, and that's where this creature is seen. And it's that's one that I had been kind of hot on for a while, quite a few years, and there was quite a few people that I talked to that are pretty like dedicated Bigfoot investigators that had never heard of it. So I was like, all right, well, this one's definitely got to get done then, because it's one that not a lot of people know about. So we went out there. It was like July. Yeah, it was like late July. So we're all like, I told everybody, I'm like, it's late July. We're in Arizona. I'm like checking the weather. I'm like, okay, it's supposed to be in like the high 70s. So I'm like, let's make sure we're dressed for warm weather. We flew to Phoenix. It was like 98 degrees. Typical late July Phoenix weather, which I'm honestly surprised it was under 100. We drove 2 hours from Phoenix to Payson, Arizona, which is where we were staying. Temperature dropped 20 degrees in that drive, so it was like 70. It was like low 70s when we got into town. And then we're like, okay, so we're gonna go up on the rim, the next day to film. Well, the whole time I had been checking the weather for Payson, not anywhere up on the rim. So when we leave Payson, it was like 75. It was nice, sunny, warm. We get up on top of the rim. It was 50 degrees and raining. And we're all like dressed for like hot weather. And it's just like, yeah, sorry guys. So everyone was kind of miserable that first like half day. And then we ended up stopping at Walmart so everybody could get, like jackets and stuff. So we poked around and, we had some really good interviews with, some guys that, kind of are up on the rim all the time doing research into this. And, we interviewed Alex Hearn, was a cryptozoologist out of Phoenix. And we did our night investigation and we found a nice little area that was pretty far away from anybody. And we had some stuff happening. I mean, there was definitely something else out there in the woods with us that, we never were able to see, but we definitely could hear.
Hold that thought. We'll be right back. And we are back. So let's hop right in. Did you get the typical Sasquatch behavior? Like, did you get rock throwing or anything interesting like that?
There was a possible, so we split up because we ended up having like 7 of us on that investigation. So we, 2 of them, 2 people stayed at camp because the lore with the Mogollon Monster is that it's one of the more aggressive of the Sasquatch kind of species variations, and a lot of the stories are that it like will raid camps and attack people at camps and this and that. So we're like, okay, well, let's create a campfire and basically set up a campsite and see if we can kind of lure this thing in. So 2 of the guys stayed at camp. And they apparently had it kind of shows up in the audio, but it's hard to hear, like a tree smack, almost like a rock against a tree. And then the other team was, me and, camera guy and audio and my cousin Michaela. And we were having our own things kind of happening where it was just a lot of like something heavy was moving through the woods. Like you could just a lot of tree snaps in the distance. And it was almost seemed like it was like pulling us apart. Like, our group and then the group at camp, like we basically were like getting farther and farther away from each other. But we never ended up seeing anything. I carry a thermal imager. I never saw anything. Like we saw no wildlife.
That's almost weirder sometimes though, to not see or hear any other wildlife, because that almost feels like something is in the area, because obviously things will stay away if there's an apex predator in the area.
Yeah. So, so we're, walking through, we're, doing everything. We're, occasionally we would just kind of stop and we'd just kind of sit around in a circle and turn our headlamps off and just sit in the dark and just kind of like listen. And, that's kind of when we would get a lot of these tree snaps because, our audio guy would just kind of, point his microphone around and he would start to hear all these different things. And then we would kind of get up and move in that direction of it. But yeah, we never once saw anything. And it sucks too up there because the ground is really the soil was really firm, and then it's all pine forest up there, so it was just pine needles all over the ground. So it was like finding tracks would have been impossible. But yeah, it was just like there was, I don't know what it was, but there had to have been. I mean, all of us heard these things. There was something out there with us.
Is there said to be multiples in this area, or is it one of those things that it seems to be that the legend's speaking of one specific one? I mean, I know Sasquatch, they usually are in groups. They're not in singles, but at least like as far as the legends goes, it's just like one single one usually seen at a time.
Most of the stories that I came across always describe kind of one creature. Obviously, there would have to be more than one, but yeah, all the stories that I've come across. I mean, I'm sure there's ones out there of multiple, but all the big cases that I've come across, it was always described as just being one singular animal.
All the big cases, were they in like a certain time period together?
Yeah, I mean, this goes all the way back to like Native American, speaking of wild man in the woods. And then I think it was like the 60s and 70s. There was a lot of stuff. I mean, this was like back when, there weren't any like major paved roads from Phoenix to Payson. It was, so this was back when it was just like super remote, super desolate, not a lot of people around. And there was, the people that would go up there would describe these things. And it's funny, there's a campsite up there called Broken Mirror Camp that essentially got its name from an encounter with the Mogollon Monster. There was a van parked up there that had its mirrors ripped off, and kind of just chaos ensued. And there's a story about a group of Boy Scouts camping up there that something terrorized their camp, and they basically hoofed it out of there in the middle of the night. And but yeah, everything is seemingly there's been obviously reports recently, but for whatever reason, it seems like a lot of Sasquatch stuff is like 60s and 70s.
I was going to say, it seems like there's like pockets of when incidents will happen. And it's like people still see these things in these areas years later. But I've often wondered if when these pockets are happening, if it's something with Sasquatch where it's like with a lot of other animals and they get to like a certain age, they kind of kick them out of the nest, where like when a male gets to a certain age, they might like kick them out and be like, this is our territory. You go find your new territory to kind of start your tribe or family in. And it seems like those younger males might be the ones that people have these encounters with when they're more aggressive, because they're going out, they're trying to find their new areas and stuff like that. And it's usually they're referred to seeing like one for like this certain period of time. And I feel like that might be that period of time between when they're getting booted off of like their old area and they got to go find their own new area to kind of start like a new group in. But just kind of going off of just other animal logic, that always seems to be like where my mind seems to go with these types of things.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely take more of a kind of biologist approach to cryptozoology and kind of view it through that lens, and kind of like, it's like, oh, these animals are similar, and this is how they, kind of act and go about their daily lives. So it's like, let's find those parallels. And it's like, oh, this cryptid is almost described similar. So, maybe it's, the same or just a similar creature sort of a thing. Yeah, I'm definitely, when it comes to Sasquatch, I'm definitely an aper. We don't buy into the woo stuff.
I mean, I definitely find the woo stuff fascinating, but at least the way that I investigate, I try to go with the most rational conclusion for something first. And it seems like you do your research the same way, and I definitely appreciate when people do their research that way, because otherwise, every single bump in the night is a ghost, every single branch breaking is a Sasquatch, and I feel like that stuff just doesn't do justice to the research. You have to evaluate if there's any other logical responses to something. And then if not after that, then you got something weird and you can investigate further into that. And like I take in all the theories, no matter how woo-woo they are. I have my thoughts on what I believe are the most practical, but I'm not going to say that woo-woo is, or that Sasquatch is out here teleporting, but I'm also not going to say that he's necessarily completely an ape. I mean, I think that a lot of like the supernatural type stuff that people experience or talk about isn't necessarily supernatural, but just rather stuff that's not understood yet. Like, perfect example that I always kind of make reference to is like there's a lot of traits that you only see specifically in one animal in nature, and it might be the same for Sasquatch, that there's some of these traits that we are looking at like they're woo-woo or supernatural, but it's just a trait that only this creature might possibly possess. And until we actually know and understand it and actually categorize it under like this is an ability that animals do have, it just seems like something completely woo-woo. Like the whole idea about animals being able to change their color for biology, like that was a crazy thing to think about for a while. Then after we started finding these species, now it's not woo-woo, it's not magic, it's something that we can understand with science. And I think that a lot of the Sasquatch stuff that people chalk up as woo-woo will be understood one day if we eventually catch up with these things and actually look at them from like a biological standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of why in our our synopsis for the show, like we explore the cultural and the biological aspects of every case. Meaning, cultural, a lot of times, at least especially in like the international cryptid cases, that it's a lot more rooted in a cultural phenomena. And there's a lot of like, that's when when you get like the really obscure stuff. And then, we look at the biological side of things. So it's like, okay, what known animals could this thing be misidentified as? What lives that we know of in this area? Okay, now let's find those parallels between the cultural and the biological, find where that kind of meets, and then that kind of serves as our kind of anchor point. And then that's what we, when we go out and do our investigating, that's kind of what we're looking for. Is, okay, we're looking for something that fits here. And, so it's like, say like the Mapaguari of Brazil, it's described as a one-eyed kind of cyclops creature with a mouth on its stomach and foul odor with big claws. Okay, well, what also used to or maybe still exists in this area? Well, you got the Megatherium or the giant ground sloth. Okay, well, what if these are the same thing? And then you have the cultural kind of stories of it, where it's this kind of fantastical creature, and then you've got the biological, which it's this, known animal. This is maybe what's just being described, and it took this kind of weird look. I mean, look at the Yeti. The Yeti is also sometimes described as, godlike, and it's, almost worshipped and revered. And there's other cryptid cases around the world that kind of have that just kind of weird, not necessarily pop culture, but just there's a weird cultural description. And then there's the, this animal could be what's being described, and it just kind of took on its own, a face of its own.
Yeah, they had something completely misunderstood, so they just tried to use their rational mind to create all these stories to try to attempt to understand it, and then it just got so spun off that a lot of people that aren't digging into this stuff, you hear this crazy case of this crazy creature, and you're just like, oh, that can't be real. This sounds too ridiculous. But you got to remember, again, at the end of the day, like, all folklore is rooted in something, whether it's that society's fears, it's something weird that they've seen. There is some root or base to it, and you got to keep digging until you figure out where the root comes from. And either one, you'll figure out it's completely folklore, or on the other side, you realize, it might be an animal that actually exists, or it's an animal that exists and you already know about, and it got separated over time. When this animal got discovered, people knew what this was, but there were still these stories that were existing that kind of took off a totally different side venture.
Well, I mean, people thought the Komodo dragons were a cryptid until Western scientists got into Komodo and were like, oh, there are giant lizards here. But I mean, it's like it's like, look at the Mokolo Mbembe, for instance. There was a subspecies of black rhinoceros that used to live in the Congo, and it's now extinct, at least in the Congo. When Western scientists have gone to the Congo to investigate Mokolo Mbembe sightings, they've shown the local pygmy, tribes people that live in the Congo jungle photos of the black rhinoceros, and they'd be like, yeah, that's what we saw. So it's like, here is, an animal that we knew existed, that these pygmy tribes member, the locals of the Congo jungle, were seeing and didn't know what the hell they were. So then it becomes a monster. It's this massive, just tank looking animal with a giant horn on its face. Now it's a monster because they don't know what it is. So obviously, Mokolo Mbembe is always described as sauropod, but it's just interesting when you find instances where it's like you show people that live in these areas that don't have access to the outside world, that maybe aren't aware of these other animals and what they are. It's like, to us, we know what a rhinoceros is. We've known what a rhinoceros is for, hundreds of years, but these people don't. So, they see something that they don't know what the hell it is. Then now it's this, now it's a monster.
I mean, depending on the context, they see it too. I mean, if this thing's in the water, if it does anything like a hippo, where they do that thing, or they kind of bounce off the bottom of the water to move, then you're seeing this thing looking like it's swimming through the water, but it's actually just a rhinoceros slowly bobbing its head up as it jumps from the bottom of the water because they can't actually swim.
Yep. Well, and if you look at some reports of Mokolo Mbembe, it's described as having a horn on its head.
So definitely, it's a rhinoceros making its way through the river.
It's definitely possible.
And chasing boats too. I mean, obviously that's usually a whole thing with like lake monsters / river monsters and stuff. And I mean, if it's a rhinoceros, those things aren't friendly. Hippos aren't friendly either. So I mean, if you got a boat in the water and you're close to these things, they're going to chase after it. I mean, how many videos are there of hippos chasing boats? Like, people think it's a joke, but those things are destructive. But add a horn on the top of their head and it's even worse.
Don't hippos have the highest like human kill count in?
I'm pretty sure they do.
Like, yeah.
And they'll do a thing where they'll like hold you down under the water and like crush you. So it's like you drowned or you're being crushed. It's like a combination of the two.
Or they just gore you.
Yeah, or they'll just rip you apart. One of the two. They look so adorable as babies. They just end up turning into these giant destructive things. And even as adults, like they still like are not scary looking animals, but you get close to these things and yeah, all bets are off, man. Same thing with buffaloes, man. Everybody thinks buffaloes are cool. You go and you want to take a picture with the buffalo, and next thing you know, you're getting flung 20 feet up in the air.
We went, so there's like a wildlife park about an hour from where we live, and it's just a huge buffalo herd. And so we drove out there, and there's signs everywhere like stay in your vehicle, and we're driving, and there's like the herd is essentially like moving across like the road that everybody drives on, and we look out and there's just a car full of people like standing out in the road, like take like feet from these things. It's like, you people are like, you either trying to get on TV or
you're trying to die.
Don't care. Yeah.
Same with moose too, man. How many people try to take pictures of moose and then don't realize how big these things are until they start charging towards them?
Oh man, moose are no joke.
Yeah, no.
Inquiries of All Reality will be back after this brief commercial break, but just a quick reminder, don't forget to go and check out the awesome sponsors of the show, I Know Squatch, Cryptoteology, Snarly All Natural Products, Oregon-ite, Dimension Devices, and Big Ape Threads. More information and discounts for those are all available down in the show description. Now feel free to fast forward through these commercials so we can hop right back into the show. And we are back, so let's get back to it.
On a lighter note, man, before we start wrapping up, I always like to dive into some of people's personal favorite experiences. So during all of your investigations you've done, like what have been your first personal favorite experiences, and what have been like some of the best evidence that you feel that you found?
The Mogollon Rim is probably still one of our favorite places, at least me personally, that we've been to. I just feel like there's, whether Bigfoot exists or not, there's just a lot of potential for things to be discovered there, just because it's such a vast area of wilderness, and it's just a beautiful area. Lake Champlain was one of our favorites. Growing up, I was always kind of, I read into that and watched it on Monster Quest, and then got to go out there and actually interview one of the people that was interviewed in the Monster Quest episode that had probably one of the craziest champ sightings, Christine Hebert, who reported seeing it kind of coming up near her family dock in the middle of the night, and didn't tell anybody, and then mentioned it to her. I think she mentioned it to her grandmother, who was just like, don't tell anybody. Like, it's like, I saw it too, kind of a thing. So it was cool to kind of speak with them. And yeah, Lake Champlain, I think there's a lot of potential for something large to exist in Lake Champlain. We talked to a lot of people that, know the lake pretty well, that have seen something that are like, I don't know what I saw. Like, it was huge and it moved through the lake with ease. The Rougarou was fun, but we did almost die.
Hey, if it was from a Rougarou, you would have been famous, right? Or it would have been completely suppressed and nobody would have knew about it.
it was just gators. I don't know, man. I love them all. There's really not one that we've done that I like disliked. There's definitely ones that I wish we could have done better or we could have done more with. But that's just kind of par for the core. Yeah, I don't know. It's just.
Have you ever had the chance to actually like get your eyes caught on something? Because I've been out a million times squatching, man. I've had weird other side evidence, like trace evidence and stuff. I've had like rock throw experiences, stuff like that. But I've never actually physically gotten to see any of these things. Of course, I've had like paranormal experiences and stuff. But like, just for you, have you actually had the opportunity to actually physically see any of these things you've been able to investigate.
Just noises. Yeah, we've yet to
remaining
capture
elusive
anything on video. Yeah.
It'll be one of those days, man. You'll catch this like perfect sighting, man. It'll like walk out in front of you and you will see this thing. That'll be the one time that you don't have your cameras up and you're just going to be in this state of like, that by the time you go to grab your camera, it's going to be gone.
I'd be weirdly okay with that. Like, as long as I like survived, I'd be okay with that. Like, it's, you know, I'd be fine just having that moment of like, holy cow, like this thing does exist. And then, you know,
seems like a lot of researchers, man, no matter how many cameras people have, and no matter what they have set up, it's always like when they're not expecting it is when it ends up happening. And that's how I guess most things end up happening in the world. Like I've had a few different investigators. It's like they'll pack up the cameras, they'll be ready to head home for the night. And as soon as that happens, man, they'll have something that'll walk across their path. And they're just like, wow, but like, come on, man. Like this experience is clearly for me. It's not meant for everybody else to see, but like, come on, man.
See, but at the same time, though, we're in a day and age now where photo and video evidence isn't going to be enough.
That is true.
So if that instance did happen where I saw something and cameras were rolling, I would immediately go to wherever it was and try to collect any sort of, you know, DNA evidence, because that's what's going to prove these things exist.
Dude, no matter what you get, though, there's always just going to be people that try to destroy it. Like,
yeah,
I've talked about this a few times, man. Like, people can physically get a Sasquatch body. There could be a million pictures of it. There can be a dissection of this thing, and people still aren't going to believe it, no matter what you put in front of them. They could physically come up and touch this thing, and they still wouldn't believe it nowadays. Or back in the day, man, you had something that was just a crude thing that may have been in, like, a block of ice, and everybody's like, whoa, that must be an ape, man.
Yeah, then at the same time, we have all these like videos that are like clearly people in suits, and everyone's just like, "Oh my god, they got evidence of it." I don't know, man. The internet is weird because it's like, it's great because it makes research so much easier, but at the same time, it makes things so much harder because you have way more nonsense to sift through, and you have, you know, it's like every cryptid page you go on, it's just like 90% nonsense. And then you get like that 10% of like genuine, like, you know, well done field work.
Yup.
It's like this is why people don't take this seriously.
I mean, even on both sides of it too, man, it's like you have people that are honestly seriously trying to research the stuff, and then on the other side you have other people that are strictly using it for like the entertainment purpose. And you see this a lot with like the paranormal, for example. So it's like both sides are entertaining, but one side's kind of ruining the research because you're just trying to make it like, oh my god, look, I saw a demon on the internet, you know what I mean? Like
everybody wants their 5 minutes.
Yep. And it's like everybody wants to be a good researcher, but at the end of the day, it's like a lot of people get swept up in, you know, trying to get that count up for as many views and stuff like that. And they'll like lose track of the research at a certain point and just start trying to make like shock value videos.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's why you know, when we shoot our show, like we don't put any like suspenseful music. We don't try to like overproduce it, oversell it. Like if nothing happens, nothing happens. Like we're, you know, like I would be doing this with or without the show. I mean, I do. Like I'm, you know, I actively research all the time. I'm always looking into new stuff. You know, the show was just kind of a fun, you know, way of presenting it to people. And you know, I'm not, you know, I'm not Chasing Legends isn't like a network show. It's, you know, we weren't handpicked to host this because, you know, we look pretty and, you know, are going to be able to sell this. We were the real deal. Like we genuinely research this stuff. We genuinely are interested in this stuff. You know, this is Chasing Legends is a cryptid show made by cryptid enthusiasts for cryptid enthusiasts, but we also make it attainable and receivable to people that are new to this kind of thing and are wanting to learn and, you know, maybe kind of take their own first steps into researching this stuff. I mean, which is why we show the whole process and how terrible it can be at sometimes.
Hey man, the independent stuff ends up being the best sometimes though, because it's like you don't have the execs saying, if you don't catch anything, we're going to end up canceling the show. So it's like you get that real research by being able to stay independent, because it's like as soon as you become part of a TV thing, you're going to have the entertainment shock value that comes in, even if you don't want to do it, which I feel like there's a lot of people on these shows that'll do this stuff that don't want to do it, but they have to do it because it's what the network needs in order for them to be able to continue producing the show. So it's like, I don't want to say necessarily selling out. It's just a matter of like, in order to have the opportunity to get out here and do the real research, you have to do this certain thing for the TV show, But hopefully it doesn't get too far, and then you just end up where every single thing is just all about just trying to turn into views. But I'm assuming you'll never get down that path because you're not on the line of trying to expand encounters. You're trying to do the real research, which I appreciate about you, man. And speaking about the real research, before we get into the words of wisdom and everything, I want to give you an opportunity to do this. I know that you recently started up a Kickstarter for a new project that you're working on. So why don't you let everybody know about the project and how exactly they can get involved with the Kickstarter?
Yeah, so we're currently running a Kickstarter to produce the season 2 of Chasing Legends. We shot season 1 in 2020 and then released it in 2021, and then we had a lot of good momentum. We had a lot of we were really gonna hit the ground running and do season 2. Then I ended up finding out I was gonna have a kid, and so that kind of set things back a little bit, and then there was a lot of other personal kind of life events within the team that kind of pushed us back. So in that kind of few years, we really sat down and we're like, how can we make this show better? Or what can we do? Let's take, what did we like about season 1? What did we dislike? Let's really hone this down and really, kind of come at this and, make a network looking show that's obviously, on YouTube for free and doesn't have all the network fluff. And I'm really happy for our concept. I'm really excited to, hopefully kind of make it for everyone. And so we're going to try and shoot 5 episodes. We're going to do Florida Skunk Ape, Flathead Lake Monster, Alta Baja, which is a Georgian lake monster, another Bigfoot case here in Minnesota, and then we're going to do an episode on Wisconsin dog band sightings. And yeah, that's up and live. It's been live for 2 weeks, and I think it runs for another. I think the 27th is when it's done. So any amount helps. We got some DVD options, T-shirts, posters. We have an executive producer option for those that are really feel like throwing some money at it. But yeah, any amount helps. I mean, $1, $5, even just sharing it. We. Like I said, I guess saying earlier, we're genuine researchers. This is going to be made, basically produced by people that are interested and want to see, real work be done, and and like the adventures, and and this is going to be all available for free for everyone to view. So yeah, that's. If you go to our website, chasinglegendscrew.com, we have a link there. Otherwise, you can go on Kickstarter and search Chasing Legends Season 2, and that's how you can find it there. We have links on our socials as well for it. Chasing Legends Official, it's both the Instagram and Facebook. So check us out. And I think Chasing Legends Official is also the handle that you can search us on YouTube as well if you want to watch our older episodes.
And of course, I will make sure I include all of those links down in the show description so everybody can find them quick and easy.
Hold tight, guys. This is the last break, so stay tuned.
And we are back, so let's hop right in. And before we completely wrap up, man, I always like to end the show with words of wisdom. So if there's any words of wisdom you could give to the listeners, whether it's other researchers out there, filmmakers, whoever you want to direct it towards, what might those words of wisdom be?
Don't die. So
that's pretty good words of wisdom. That's pretty universal across everything.
There's so there's to those that want to get into this cryptid research, YouTube, podcasting, whatever. There's a lot of there's a really good obviously, just like the ghost hunting field, the cryptozoology field has its bads. But there's a good group of people out there that genuinely care. They're good people that are more than happy to talk with you and kind of get you on the right path if you kind of want to do similar things. A lot of good pages out there. Association of Cryptozoologic Fieldwork and Analysis. Nate, you're gonna hate me for messing that up. Crash Course Cryptozoology is also another one, another good Facebook group ran by a friend of mine, Carrick, who also helps research for the show. Yeah, ton of good Facebook groups out there. Tons of good YouTube content. Tons of great podcasts, such as this one. Bigfoot Society is another great one. Strangeology. Obviously, gotta throw some credit towards Small Town Monsters. Yeah, I mean, there's just a good network of people out there that are more than happy to kind of share their knowledge and share their research and get you going. I'm one of them, so feel free to reach out with any questions about anything. I love talking cryptids, so if you got something you want to run by me or question or tell me about, let's do it. Yeah, just don't be afraid to ask these people. Like I said, they're in the same category, same boat, same community as you, and the more brotherhood, sisterhood, unity we have, the better it's going to be. And we're all in this for the same common goal of proving these things exist. So let's work together.
Dude, it's a very inviting community. Of course, there's some splits within the community, but like everybody is just so polite. And once you become part of the community, man, it's like you have all these friends that you can just go out, you can experience, you can share things with. And kind of funny, man, everybody that you had just mentioned actually are previous guests on the show too. So it's like, even within that, man, we've all like intermixed with each other. Like I was saying in the beginning, man, I'm surprised that we didn't get along to this faster, because once you run the community, man, it's like all just a mixture of the same people. It's like we all just cross each other's paths.
Yeah, I mean, and even some of like the the godfathers of cryptozoology, like, do not be afraid to reach out to them. Like
Lyle Blackburn, man, was one of the nicest people I've had on the show, man, and I'm sure a lot of people.
I've yet to talk to him, but like, I never in my wildest dreams would imagine that I would like be like friends with Ken Gerhardt or David Weatherly or some of the other like big names in cryptozoology that have been that I like grew up like watching on TV and reading their stuff. And so these guys are they're very happy to kind of
take people in under their wing.
Yeah, exactly, and guide the next generation of cryptid researchers into the field. And so yeah, I mean, it's a great community. It's a fantastic community. I feel honored and privileged to be a part of it and know a lot of these people. And I'd say I have too many friends in this community now, and a lot more people like you that I've never met in person.
Then you finally go to an event and it's like a reunion. It's like you guys have known each other your whole life. You've never seen the guy in person before, and you're like, "What's up, man?" You run up and give him a big hug.
It really is, though. I can't remember there's been a few times where I've like met people that I've like, it was recently. It was at the Van Meter Visitor Festival. I don't know if you know of Tobias Wayland, is this Singular Fortean Society out of Wisconsin. Yeah. I've known him for years just online, and he walked in, I was like, Tobias, and it was just like we knew each other. It was like I saw him yesterday kind of a thing. It was just like, there's all these people that it's like I talk to, all the time over the years that have never met in person. Yeah, it's just like once you actually do meet them in person, it's just like you have known them, and it's like you've met them and have known them for years, kind of a thing.
Dude, my co-host for Bizarre Encounters lives in North Carolina. I'm in Michigan. We've only seen each other twice in person the entire time we've been doing the show, but every time we get in person, it's like we've known each other our whole life, man. It's weird how like close you get to people sometimes over the internet, because it's like you don't have the distractions of other stuff going on. It's like you can actually have these one-on-one conversations, and you get weirdly close to people in the community, even though you've never met each other in person.
Yeah, well, it's like me and Carrick St. Laurent from Crash Course Cryptozoology. Never met him in person. We talk almost daily. And like I said, he like helps me with like the research stuff. We do various, other, talk about other projects. Like never once met in person, but I know when we do, it's going to be a great time.
I got a few on those lists, man.
He lives out in Maine. I'm here in Minnesota. It just never happened, but
you got to find that perfect event that's in the middle one day, or just make an excuse. You got to go do some type of investigation or something, and just make it an excuse.
It's funny too because it's like we were when we filmed Out East for season 1, we were in we did Lake Champlain and then we did Pukwudgies in Massachusetts. So it's like there was 2 instances where I was out in his area and we never once like met.
Next time you have to make sure you mark it.
Next time.
Well, man, I appreciate you making the time to come on the show today. It was a really, really fun conversation, man. And once you get season 2 kicked off, man, we'll have to have you come back on the show and share some of the new stuff you're diving into.
Yeah, hopefully it happens.
Cross my fingers, but you got to have the best intentions, man. I know it's going to happen because you believe that it's going to happen. That's half the battle, man. You got to manifest it in your mind. And at the end of the day, man, even if you don't get all the funding you need, you'll still end up making it work. And I have faith in you that you'll find a way regardless.
Hopefully.
If anyone is interested in getting a hold of me for any reason whatsoever, you guys can email me at inquiriesofourrealitypodcast@outlook.com, or you can guys get a hold of me through social media, Instagram or Facebook. Instagram is the one that I'm the most active on, or you guys can get a hold of me through the submission forms, which are available on the link tree. One of them is to contact me, and the other one is to report an encounter. So while you're at it, don't forget to report those encounters to ommencounterreports@outlook.com, or you guys can call into the voicemail and be featured on upcoming episodes, and that phone number is 313-364-1551. And every single thing that I mentioned throughout the show is all available on the link tree, which is available down in that show description. And with that, hope you guys enjoyed the conversation. I hope today's show has connected some dots in your own reality, and I'll catch you on the next one. Have a good night, everybody.